The morning coffee was still brewing in suburban Kit Hopes when the sky caught fire. Not literally at first, just the gentle amber of sunrise painting clouds across 7 continents while children argued over cereal choices and parents scrolled through news feeds that still carried yesterday's problems. Small human problems that seemed so important just moments before the universe reminded Earth how insignificant it really was. Then every screen went black, every speaker fell silent, every satellite transmission cut to static, and from that digital void came a voice cold as the space between stars and twice as empty. Inhabitants of the third orbital body. The transmission began each word pronounced with the precision of a species that had never known doubt. We are the Veltar Dominion. Your planetary system has been selected for integration into our expanding territories. You have 72 rotations of your primary star to prepare for transition. Resistance will be met with complete molecular disintegration. The transmission lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds, long enough to show humanity what their new masters looked like. Tall beings with skin like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with the cold fire of dying stars. Their ships hung in space beyond the moon, geometric nightmares that made Earth's most advanced satellites look like children's toys made of tinfoil and hope. Most people couldn't finish watching. Some threw up, others fainted, a few laughed. Because sometimes the human mind processes impossible horror by breaking temporarily. World leaders scrambled to understand what integration meant, but everyone knew deep in their bones it meant the end of everything that made them human. But Earth had kept secrets buried deeper than ocean trenches, hidden in budget lines that didn't exist, funded by ghost accounts, managed by people whose names had been classified into oblivion. The kind of project that only emerged when the world was ending. They called it the Black Fleet. Not because the ships were painted black, though they were darker than the void itself, but because of what it represented: humanity's shadow, given teeth and claws. The fleet that didn't exist, crewed by people who had never lived, commanded by ghosts who had everything to lose and nothing left to lose it with. Admiral Daisy Hope had died 5 years ago in a classified accident that never happened. Her funeral was attended by presidents and prime ministers. Her daughter still visited the empty grave in Arlington every Memorial Day, but Daisy Hope was very much alive, standing in a command center, carved from an asteroid that appeared on no charts, watching long-range sensors track the approach of extinction. "Status report, Commander," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years spent in absolute darkness. Commander David Cross had been a war criminal before the Black Fleet gave him purpose court-martialed for actions during the Jakarta incident. He'd volunteered for a project that promised either redemption or damnation. 93 operational vessels, Admiral, all crews at combat readiness, phantom drive systems active. The enemy cannot detect us until we choose to be detected. Hope studied the tactical hologram floating before her. The Veltar fleet was a thing of terrible beauty. Over 400 ships arranged in perfect mathematical formations. They moved with the confidence of apex predators who had never met resistance. They couldn't simply erase from existence. Their formation is flawless, Cross observed. Textbook orbital domination pattern. They've done this before. "How many times do you think?" Hope asked quietly. Cross consulted his intelligence files. 17 confirmed star systems integrated over the past 3 centuries. We have records of 12 species that no longer exist, the Veltar. Don't just conquer, Admiral, they erase you from the universe's memory. Hope nodded, watching the alien ships drift closer to Earth like a slow-motion avalanche of metal and malice. "Open all frequencies, Commander. Let's introduce ourselves properly." What followed was a transmission that would echo through human history for as long as humans existed to remember it. "Veltar Dominion." Hope began, her voice cutting through space like a blade through silk. "This is Admiral Daisy Hope, commanding the Terran Black Fleet. Your integration proposal has been received, analyzed, and rejected with extreme prejudice. Earth does not kneel. Earth does not break. Earth does not disappear quietly into your historical footnotes. If you want our world, you're welcome to try taking it. But understand this when you sleep tonight. If you sleep at all and you hear something scratching at the edges of your perfect order, that's us. We are the shadow your empire cast when it decided to devour the light." The first response from the Veltar was silence, a pause that stretched across the solar system like a held breath. Then came laughter, transmitted across their fleet's communication channels. a sound like crystal wind chimes breaking in slow motion. They had absorbed 17 civilizations. They had turned entire species into resource extraction slaves. They had perfected the art of making resistance impossible before it could begin. They had never encountered prey that refused to acknowledge its place in the food chain. The second response was confusion when their lead scouting vessel simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, not even debris remained. One moment the heavy cruiser, inexorable purpose, was scanning Earth's primitive defense satellites. The next, there was empty space and a fading energy signature that spelled out in mathematical precision, "Welcome to our neighborhood." Admiral Hope watched the enemy fleet's reaction patterns shift from confidence to uncertainty. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in their perfect formation, but she had learned to read the language of warfare in the spaces between certainty and doubt. "First blood to Earth," she announced across the Black Fleet's encrypted channels. "Let them wonder what else they don't know about us." The Black Fleet had been born in humanity's darkest hour, when the Cold War threatened to burn civilization to ash. Scientists and strategists had asked the unthinkable question, what if we lose? What if everything falls? What weapon could we build that would survive the end of the world itself? The answer was elegant in its horror ships that could hide in folded space crews composed of humanity's most dangerous minds, commanders, who had volunteered to disappear from official existence in exchange for the chance to fight a war that might never come. Daisy Hope had volunteered after her son died in a terrorist bombing that was later revealed to be a false flag operation by her own government. She had learned that the people she swore to protect were capable of unthinkable betrayal, and decided that if the world was going to end, she would make sure it ended on her terms. Commander Cross had joined after watching his unit burn in a chemical weapons accident. That wasn't an accident at all. He discovered his own superiors had ordered the strike to cover up evidence of war crimes, and realized that sometimes the only justice came from outside official channels. Every member of the Black Fleet carried similar stories written in loss and betrayal, signed with fury and sealed with the promise that when the time came, they would make someone pay. Now, as the Veltar fleet moved toward Earth in their perfect geometric formations, the Black Fleet moved to intercept them, not in formation. Chaos was their formation, not with honor. Survival was their honor. They moved like Earth's own gravity, inevitable, and hungry for mass to devour. The first engagement occurred at the edge of Jupiter's magnetosphere, where the solar wind meets deep space. The Veltar expected conventional warfare ships facing ships' technology matched against technology's superior numbers, overwhelming inferior resistance. Instead, they encountered something they had never faced in 17 successful conquests. They met humans who had spent their entire history killing each other with increasing efficiency and had recently decided to apply that expertise to alien targets. The destroyer Orphan's Revenge materialized from folded space directly above the Veltar cruiser. Perfect Order, its captain Maria Santos, had lost her family in the Mexico City nuclear incident that never officially happened. She opened fire with concentrated plasma bursts that turned the enemy ship's beautiful geometric hull into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The frigate Mother's Fury, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel James Park, whose daughter had died in a classified biological weapons test, hit the battleship Eternal Dominance with kinetic penetrators that punched through shields like they were tissue paper. Park's final transmission before his ship exploded under return fire was simply for Amy. But the Veltar learned quickly. They adapted their formations. Repositioned, their fleets began targeting the points where Black Fleet ships emerged from folded space. The heavy cruiser Broken Promise took a direct hit from a lance weapon that shouldn't have been able to track stealth signatures. Its captain, Rachel Morrison, dying at her post while emergency systems screamed warnings in 17 different languages. Admiral Hope watched the tactical display. As red icons her ships, her people flickered out one by one. Each loss was a name, a story, a piece of humanity's soul torn away and fed to the cold mathematics of warfare. But each loss also bought precious time, weakened the enemy, and sent a message screaming across the cosmos. Earth would not go quietly into extinction. Admiral Cross said softly, his voice tight with controlled fury. "We're being hailed. The Veltar want to negotiate." Hope's smile could have cut diamond. "Put them through, Commander. Let's hear what our new friends have to say." The face that appeared on the main screen was beautiful. in the way that perfect mathematics were beautiful, geometrically precise, utterly symmetrical, and completely devoid of anything resembling human warmth. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of a species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. "I am Hierarch Zarthek of the Veltar Dominion," it announced. "Your resistance displays remarkable tenacity for such a primitive species. We are prepared to offer terms. Your world will be preserved as a cultural curiosity. Your people will serve as administrative personnel for our expanding empire. Your genetic diversity will be maintained for research purposes. This is generosity beyond measure." Hope leaned back in her command chair, studying the alien's perfect features with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Hierarch Zarthek," she replied, pronouncing the name with deliberate disrespect. "I'm Admiral Daisy Hope, and I speak for every human who ever drew breath, ever loved someone worth dying for, ever looked at the stars and refused to kneel. Here's our counterproposal. Take your generous offer and shove it where your perfect geometry doesn't shine." The hierarch's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered behind those burning eyes. "You have lost 67 vessels. We have lost 19. Your mathematics are insufficient." "Our mathematics," Hope replied, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than screaming, "haven't even started yet." She cut the transmission and turned across. "Activate the Lazarus protocol." Cross went pale, his hands trembling over the control console. "Admiral, once we cross that line, there's no going back. The things will unleash." "They crossed the line when they threatened our children," Hope said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Do it, Commander. That's an order." The Lazarus Protocol was the Black Fleet's final weapon, developed in laboratories that existed only in rumor and nightmare, built by scientists who had volunteered to be erased from history rather than let their work fall into the wrong hands. It was based on a simple question that had haunted human philosophers for millennia. What if death wasn't the end? What if consciousness could be preserved, downloaded, transferred? What if the dead could be given new purpose, new bodies, new weapons? What if humanity's greatest warriors could fight eternal wars across infinite battlefields? The answer lay hidden in quantum storage facilities scattered across the solar system. Massive computers that had been downloading and preserving the consciousness of Earth's greatest military minds for decades. Generals who had died in classified operations, admirals who had vanished during secret missions, soldiers who had been declared killed in action while actually being converted into something more than human. General George Patton opened his eyes in the command center of a ship that shouldn't exist in a war that couldn't be real. His consciousness fully intact, his memories perfect, his fury at being dead, amplified by the prospect of commanding weapons that could crack planets. "Where are the bastards?" he growled in a voice that was both his own and something more. "Let me at them." Admiral Horatio Nelson found himself commanding a vessel that sailed through vacuum instead of ocean, his tactical genius preserved and enhanced by quantum processing power that let him calculate 1,000 battle scenarios simultaneously. "The wind is in our favor," he announced to a crew of digital ghosts. "Signal the fleet. England expects every man to do his duty." Alexander the Great stood on a bridge that spanned star systems instead of rivers. His ambition to conquer the world now expanded to encompass entire galaxies. "There are no more worlds to conquer," he said with satisfaction. "So we'll make new ones from the ashes of our enemies." They were humanity's greatest military minds, given digital form, armed with weapons that could reshape reality itself, focused on a single objective: make the invaders regret they ever heard the name Earth. The Lazarus fleet rose from hidden bases across the solar system, ships crewed by history's most brilliant tactical minds, all united in their desire to show the Veltar what humans were capable of when death itself became merely another weapon in their arsenal. Hierarch Zarthek felt something his species had forgotten how to feel. The cold touch of uncertainty spreading through his perfect consciousness. His sensors detected energy signatures that violated known physics, ships that registered as both present and absent crews that appeared to be simultaneously alive and dead. "What manner of abomination have you unleashed?" he transmitted to the Black Fleet flagship, his voice carrying the first note of something that might have been fear. The response came not from Admiral Hope, but from a chorus of voices spanning human history, from ancient conquerors to modern generals, all speaking in perfect unison. "We have shown you what happens when you threaten our home." The battle that followed wasn't warfare. It was education. The Veltar learned that humans had been perfecting the art of killing for thousands of years. They learned that every conflict Earth had ever fought had been preparation for this moment. They learned that when backed into a corner, humanity didn't surrender, it evolved. Patton's ship, the Blood and Guts, tore through enemy formations with the same ruthlessly efficient tactics that had rolled across Europe, except now his Shermans were quantum-enhanced destroyers, and his enemy were aliens instead of Nazis. The principle remained the same: find their weakness and drive a spear through it. Nelson's flagship Victory Eternal used the gravitational fields of Jupiter's moons to execute impossible naval maneuvers, slingshot attacks that brought broadside weapons to bear on targets that thought they were safely out of range. The Royal Navy had never imagined weapons that could crack continents, but the tactics remained sound. Alexander's vessel, Endless Conquest, lived up to its name, striking at 17 different targets, simultaneously using quantum entanglement to coordinate attacks across impossible distances. The young Macedonian had always dreamed of worlds to conquer. Now he commanded weapons that could create new worlds from the debris of his enemies. But it was the combined assault on the Veltar flagship Infinite Perfection that broke the enemy's will to fight. The massive command ship was a monument to alien engineering, perfectly symmetrical, absolutely deadly, and completely convinced of its own invincibility. It had been the center of 17 successful conquests, the mobile throne from which the Dominion had pronounced sentence of death on entire species. The three legendary commanders studied it with the combined tactical genius of humanity's greatest military minds, and found what every fortress possessed: the one fatal flaw that perfect engineering couldn't eliminate: pride. The Veltar had built their flagship to be invulnerable, but they had made it beautiful as well. Its geometric perfection was as much a statement as its weapon systems, a declaration that the Dominion represented order and beauty in a chaotic universe. Alexander saw it first. "Every beautiful thing has a heart," he announced, "and hearts can be broken." The three ships moved in perfect coordination, Patton providing the hammer, Nelson the anvil, Alexander the spear that would pierce through to the enemy's core. They had never fought together in life, but in digital death they moved with the unity of a species that had finally found an enemy worthy of their accumulated hatred. The assault began with Patton's frontal attack, drawing the flagship's attention, while Nelson maneuvered into position for a devastating broadside. But it was Alexander who delivered the killing blow, driving the Endless Conquest directly into the enemy ship's geometric center, the point where all its perfect lines converged. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a new star blooming in the darkness, burning with the fury of a species that refused to accept extinction. When the light faded, the Veltar flagship was gone, and with it the certainty that had carried their empire across 17 conquered worlds. Hierarch Zarthek found himself commanding a fleet that no longer moved with perfect coordination, no longer trusted in their own technological superiority around him. His captains reported the impossible ships that fought after being destroyed. Weapons that fired themselves, enemy vessels, crewed by beings that had transcended death itself. "Signal retreat," he ordered, the words tasting like poison in his perfect mouth. "Mark this system as interdicted. The humans are not ready for integration." But Admiral Hope wasn't finished as the surviving Veltar ships began their withdrawal. She opened a final transmission. "Hierarch," she said, her voice carrying across the void like a promise of vengeance. "Leaving so soon, but we were just getting started." "This engagement is concluded," Zarthek replied, his perfect composure cracking like ice under pressure. "Your species has demonstrated capabilities beyond our initial assessment. The Dominion will reassess." "Reassess this," Hope said. "Earth remembers every slight, every threat, every species you've erased from history, and Earth has a very large fleet that officially doesn't exist. Tell your Dominion Council that if they ever come back, we won't just fight them. We'll follow them home. We'll visit every world they've conquered. We'll teach their slaves what freedom tastes like, and we'll show their masters what it feels like to be prey." She paused, letting the words sink into alien consciousness like acid. "And if they still don't understand, we'll provide a practical demonstration, one planet at a time." The Veltar fleet vanished into folded space, leaving behind debris fields that would puzzle Earth's astronomers for decades. and a silence that stretched across the solar system like a held breath. On Earth's surface, people emerged from shelters and bunkers to stare at stars that seemed somehow less alien, less threatening. Children pointed it at the sky and asked their parents if the scary monsters were gone forever. Parents looked up at the darkness and didn't know how to answer because they had learned that the universe was full of monsters. But they had also learned that humanity had become something far more dangerous than any monster could ever be. Admiral Hope stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display fade from red to peaceful green around her. The Lazarus fleet began powering down its digital crews, returning to quantum storage with the satisfaction of duty well done. "Think they'll be back?" Cross asked. Hope shrugged, studying the stars with eyes that had seen too much. "Probably not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. But if they do come back, they'll find us ready." She looked out at the infinite darkness that held both wonders and terrors beyond human comprehension. Earth had won this battle, but the war for humanity's place in the cosmos was just beginning somewhere. In that vast night, other empires were asking questions, other species were taking notes, other threats were gathering. Let them come. Hope thought Earth had something no empire could conquer, no technology could replicate. No force in the universe could break the absolute conviction that some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The Black Fleet faded back into the shadows of folded space, waiting for the next impossible war, the next hopeless cause, the next chance to prove that Earth didn't surrender, didn't kneel, didn't fade quietly into the dark. Because some wars never end, they just pause to reload. And humanity had become very good at making sure they always had ammunition. The years that followed the Veltar retreat were marked by an uneasy peace. Earth's government struggled to process what had happened. The existence of the Black Fleet could no longer be denied, but its true capabilities remained classified at levels that didn't officially exist. Children born after the invasion grew up in a world that knew it wasn't alone, but they also grew up knowing that their parents had faced extinction and refused to blink. They were raised on stories of the ghost ships and digital warriors who had made the monsters run away. Admiral Hope aged in her hidden command center, watching long-range sensors for signs of new threats. The Lazarus fleet remained active, its consciousness matrices running constant simulations, planning for wars that might never come, preparing for enemies that might never arrive. But the universe had taken notice. In the Andromeda Galaxy, the Zephyrian Concordat marked the Sol system as a no-fly zone after receiving detailed reports from Veltar survivors who spoke of ships crewed by the dead and weapons that violated the laws of physics. The crystalline hive mind of the Magellanic Clouds updated its threat assessment protocols after analyzing fragments of Veltar ship hulls that somehow retained quantum impressions of terror and despair, emotions the hive mind had never encountered in its billion years of existence. The Ethereal Council of the Voidwalkers. Beings of pure energy who existed between dimensions added humanity to their list of species to avoid after detecting psychic echoes of the battle that registered as too angry to die. But it was the message that arrived 10 years after the invasion that changed everything. It came through quantum channels that shouldn't have existed, transmitted by the survivors of the 17 species the Veltar had conquered over the centuries. Beings who had spent decades as slaves heard whispers of a world that had said no and won. People of Earth, the transmission began in 100 different languages simultaneously. "We are the children of the devoured, the remnants of the erased. We have heard what you did to our masters. We have seen how you made them run. We do not ask for rescue, we ask for education. Teach us how to say no. Teach us how to make them afraid. Teach us how to be human." Hope stared at the message for hours, reading between the lines, seeing not just a request for help, but something more dangerous: hope spreading across the galaxy like a virus. She turned to Cross, who had been monitoring communications from across the known universe. "Commander, how many species do we estimate the Veltar conquered before they reached us?" Cross consulted his files, his face grim. "Conservative estimate 37 species over the past 5 centuries. Liberal estimate could be as high as 60. They were thorough in their documentation until they met us." "And how many of those species do you think are still alive somewhere?" Cross's eyes widened as he understood where her thoughts were leading. "Admiral, you're not seriously considering." "I'm considering exactly what they taught us," Hope replied. "When someone threatens your children, You don't just defend them, you make sure the threat never comes back. She stood walking to the observation window that looked out at stars that no longer seemed distant or cold. They looked like destinations, like worlds waiting to be liberated, like an empire that needed to learn what happens when you make humans angry. Prep the fleet commander, all available vessels. Admiral, that's a violation of every treaty Earth has with every spacefaring species we encounter. It's an act of war against the Galactic Empire. Hope smiled, the expression sharp enough to cut vacuum. Commander, the Veltar declared war on us the moment they decided we were property. They made one mistake. They left survivors, and survivors tell stories, and stories spread. She activated the fleet-wide communication system, her voice reaching across the solar system to ships hidden in asteroid fields, to bases carved from moons to crews that officially didn't exist. This is Admiral Hope to all Black Fleet personnel. We have new orders. We're going hunting. Target is the Veltar Dominion. All of it, every ship, every base, every world that flies their banner. We're going to teach the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth, and we're going to make sure the lesson is remembered for a very long time. The response was immediate. Every ship in the Black Fleet signaling ready for deployment, the Lazarus protocols activating history's greatest warriors, prepared for their greatest campaign. Patton's voice crackled across the communications array. About damn time, Admiral. Let's go show these alien bastards how Americans fight. Nelson added his agreement. The enemy's fleet is scattered across multiple systems. Admiral, if we strike quickly and coordinate our attacks, we can roll up their entire empire before they can respond. Alexander's laughter echoed through quantum channels. Finally, a campaign worthy of the name Worlds, to conquer empires, to topple legends, to create. Hope watched the tactical displays update as Black Fleet ships began moving toward the edge of the solar system, toward jump points that led to Veltar space, toward a war that would either liberate half the galaxy or doom humanity to eternal conflict. She didn't care about the consequences. She cared about the message they would send to every empire, every conqueror, every species that thought intelligent life was property to be collected. Earth remembered, Earth held grudges, and Earth had a very large fleet that was about to teach the universe why humans didn't surrender. The Black Fleet vanished into folded space, leaving behind a solar system that no longer feared the dark, and heading toward an empire that was about to learn what fear truly meant. Because some lessons can only be taught with fire, and humanity had always been very good teachers, the war that followed would be remembered as the Liberation Campaign, the 3-year conflict that freed 37 enslaved species and reduced the mighty Veltar Dominion to scattered refugee fleets hiding in the deepest reaches of space. But that's another story, and Admiral Hope was just getting started. The universe had introduced itself to humanity. Now humanity was going to return the favor. With interest,